Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Lisa Winneke. I am so honored to have you on the show. And as I mentioned before we started recording, you are my very first Australian guest. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What do you win?
Exactly.
Tell her what she wins.
It did feel that way, didn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm eager to have you share your story with us. And let's start out with, tell me what values or beliefs were instilled in you as you were growing up that then played out as you got older.
Ooh, what a question. The values that were instilled growing up, I know my values now, which I wasn't aligned with until the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. The values of hard work, which were instilled in me, but I chose not to actually go along with those values.
Okay.
The value of discipline. That was something that has stuck with me throughout. It's an interesting question, Laurie, because it's really having me see that the values that I have that are my values, why my childhood and teenage life and my adult life for a large part why I was so disconnected, because they were so misaligned with the values that are true for me.
So the ones that your family were teaching you were not aligned with what was true to you? That's
right. So, for example, I don't know if we would say if it was a value, but so one of my highest values is honesty. Now, growing up, I grew up in a home where that wasn't valued. There was a lot of secrets that I was aware of, secrets that one of my parents might not have been aware of. So that was something that was so in misalignment to who I was, which is why it's so integral in what I do, in what I share, that I'm honest, that who I show up as is the person that actually is me inside. And integrity is also coupled with that.
Interesting. When did you pick that up? Was it when you were a child still?
No. When I really got aligned, when I really got clear on my values, no, those values became clear as I started to go on my own healing journey, as I shared with you, through this process of healing from bulimia, which I'd experienced for 20 years, and depression and the disconnect. And as I started to reconnect with myself and understand and know who I was, then it became clearer about the things that actually were most important. And I was able to look at how I behaved and the choices that I made, and when I felt most in alignment, and that gave me insights into what I valued the most. Okay. And also what I got triggered by. So what triggers me are people being dishonest, people not being in integrity, people showing up as something other than who they are. So I could then really hone in and get what I valued the most, and then commit to living those values, because by committing to living those values, then that meant that I was living in alignment with me.
Yeah. Did life get easier when you started doing that?
Yeah. That didn't answer your question per se, did it? Because, and I'm sorry, because that actually is that is something that I will go back and reflect on as to what values that were instilled in me, because I really feel like I've thrown a lot of it out. And I did as a teenager. I rebelled so much. So yes, so going back to that question you just asked me.
Yeah. So, okay, but one of the things you just mentioned about dealing with bulimia for 20 years, what is that related in any way to that family, those family dynamics?
I can, as we all can, looking back, and I put the pieces together when I wrote my book, The Dawn of Hope, which I wrote about 5 years ago, and understanding, of course, because there's no blame. I like just to preface this.
Sure.
There is no blame, that our parents were always doing the best that they could. But I grew up in a home that I struggled with the secrets and the lies. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel part of the family unit. I felt misaligned. I remember when I was a really young child lying in bed and questioning, how did I end up in this family? I think I was 5 or 6 years old. Like, wow. Who chose this for me? Because at that age, I was already feeling not part of the family unit. And so I didn't feel like I belonged. So then obviously that manifested over a period of 10 years. And by the time I got to 18, I was so disconnected from myself, so disconnected from my family. I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't feel safe anywhere or with me, that was the manifestation of all of that pain and heartache and brokenheartedness.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so curious about the secrets. I don't want you to tell me all of them, but were you biologically born into that family?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Well, everyone says I look like my mother. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But so, and I've got great relationships with them now. And this has been my life's work. And I understand now that I was born into that family in order to heal through relationship.
Okay.
Because now, yeah.
I was the reason I asked it, and I was almost not going to ask it, but I had to ask it because you felt like you didn't belong. So I was just wondering if, because sometimes adopted children feel that way. And so I was just wondering where that might have come from. I don't know. It's too personal. You can say back off.
No, not. And it's more so in respect for my family. It's something that in the past that I felt like I needed to speak my truth, but I understand now it's also maintaining my relationships with my family. So no, I very much look like my mother. I think it was just that I felt like the black sheep in the family. I felt highly in tune with the things going on around me. I'm like, why can't people see what I'm seeing? Yeah. Why can't my siblings see what I'm seeing? Why can't everyone else see what I am seeing? Why can't my parents see what's going on inside their relationship? And look, that's not to say that they couldn't, but at the time as a young child, I felt like the way I saw the world and the way I saw things was not the way that they saw it.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? Because I had a similar experience. I would fight with my parents all the time about religion, the religion I was raised in, and I didn't feel like it fit me. And so we would argue all the time, and I'm like, how can you not see what I like, kind of like what you're saying? But I felt discounted because you're only a kid, right? So how could you, it was almost like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're just a kid. You don't know what's right yet. We are going to make the decisions for you because you're only, 11 or 12 or whatever.
And that's where the power starts being taken away, and we forget how powerful we are, because as we know with kids, I mean, I look at my kids, they're more connected, especially when we're younger. We're more connected to something greater than, we haven't gone into the egoic state that we find ourselves in as adults. And so they're actually, I mean, I look at my kids are my greatest teachers. They have been my greatest teachers and continue to be. So, and it's interesting, it reminds me of, I was in conversation with a guy on my podcast last year, and he was a black guy and it was a rapper, and he was saying, he was young, but oh my God, so wise. And he was saying he was telling me a story about his 6-year-old niece that was sharing something profound about the way that, inequality. And he said, don't let anyone ever tell you that your opinion and what you say doesn't count, because you are the leaders, you are the future of the world. And if we look at the state of the world right now, our kids, that generation, they're the leaders coming through, and what they're experiencing and what they're witnessing, I'll be fascinated to see how the world changes as a result of them living through a pandemic.
Yes, because again, going back to the question I asked you, these are the values and circumstances that they're growing up with. So of course they can't help but influence how they become as adults, how they operate.
And how they change the world, how they change the way that we are educated, big institutions, employment. I mean, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every generation says that about the kids, though, right?
Yeah, I know.
Of course, this is different than our generation was growing up with, for sure.
And they're going to be far more resilient as a result. But then there's also the contrast and the polarity of there's going to be a lot more mental illness, anxiety, depression as a result of these external circumstances. So it's a really interesting, because I think we shared it when we connected, was that one of the reasons why I felt so compelled to follow that nudge 3 years ago that had me choose to leave my marriage was to leave a legacy for my boys. And the legacy of what it looks like and what it looks like to live from our whole hearts.
Yes.
And so I know in doing that the values that I'm instilling that they can see is the value of living in alignment with what is highest and best from our whole hearts, the value of courage, the value of honesty, and the value of integrity. So values are such a big part of what I do, and actually the work that I do with clients now, because when we actually know when we know what our values are and we commit to them, life really does get easier and more peaceful and more in joy and in flow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that it's the matter of getting clear. You know, once you have that clarity, you can move forward with purpose and confidence and courage. Not that it's going to be a piece of cake necessarily. It's still going to be challenging. But you have this certainty in you that you know you're moving in the right direction. Yeah. And you and I both work, I work with clients on that too in the program that I run, the F Being Fine. And F Being Fine experience. Yeah. But helping people from start out getting clarity and then taking them through, because there's really nothing else you can do if you don't have clarity. Like everything I feel like comes from that place, right? That's what you're saying too. Getting clear on your values.
Getting clear on your values, getting clear on what's pulling you out of being in alignment, getting clear on your beliefs like you were sharing before, because as we know, we're either creating from beliefs or we're creating from heart. So clear. The clearer I got, the more aware I got of me and what lit me up, what pulled me out of my center, what were those stories that I've been telling myself. The more clear I got, like the more I knew me, the more I could be with me, the more I could honor me, the more I could back me, then that transformed and continues to transform into the way that I show up, particularly in relationship.
Yes. Yes. And in teasing out your values versus those values that were instilled in you by other people that are not your values, that are somebody else's values, but they were programmed into you.
Yeah, so certainly the value of hard work, which I've had to, I'm still breaking away, because it's interesting that one of the things in lockdown that's showing me is that there's still something that is underneath the surface that's telling me, driving me, that I need to be doing more. Because I've grown up in a family where it's all about achieving success. And so to be an entrepreneur and to be in a state of flow where life is working for you, which is the complete antithesis of working hard, I'm still bumping up against that.
I am with you, Lisa. And then add on top of that, I'm a Capricorn. So, mountain goats, we're always climbing. It's difficult.
Yeah. And
but
conscious awareness, but that conscious awareness and that clarity on what the things that have had us being driven, motivated unconsciously, is what then helps us to change that, quicken that refractory period where we can return to being in alignment.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that awareness is just the first step? Because clearly you and I are both aware, and we're still, and I'm sure many of my listeners as well, still doing the thing. We're still pushing ourselves to work harder and achieve more and be more productive. And even though we know that being in the flow is the better way to be, the more natural.
And so isn't it the dance of remembering and forgetting? And so, even as you're saying that, I can feel my heart opening, because I'm like, it's the remembering. And then each time I remember, that's where I was, and I'm compassionate and so soft and gentle with myself.
I love that.
Okay, here we are, it's okay. And then hands again on my body, on my heart. Darling, good. I just really want to acknowledge you've caught that. And every time I catch myself out of my centre, out of my heart, it's another opportunity to expand more into love of self and a state of love. So it's a dance, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And I'm remembering something that you said in our conversation earlier about the legacy that you wanted to leave, or that you want to leave, stems from leading from the heart.
Yeah. That is absolutely, I am getting emotional again, but I had to be so disconnected, so utterly disconnected from self and heart, to know the contrast, to know what it felt like, to know the experience of walking the path back home.
That is such an important point you're making.
Because I could read it, we can all read how to do it, but to do it for self, to experience it, to know how hard it is, the challenges you're going to bump up against, the stories you're going to bump up against, the fear you're going to bump up. Somebody shared a Zen proverb with me last week after I shared my story, and she said, the obstacles are not off the path, the obstacles are the path. And, I really loved that, because it's that reminder that life is always happening for us, and those obstacles are the gifts for us to go back to, return to extract the wisdom from them through the healing, through the meeting. Essentially, the healing is the meeting these stories with love and compassion and presence.
And I would add, potentially welcoming.
Yeah.
Welcoming the obstacles as a gift. As difficult as that sounds like it would be, admittedly. But what if we could look at it that way?
Which I think it happens the more we cultivate the practice of returning to the obstacle, going, oh my goodness, if it wasn't for that, I would not be, if it wasn't for every single obstacle along the way, you and I would not be in conversation. I would not be enjoying the connections that I now have with people. I would not be feeling more and more in flow. I would not be able to meet my humanity in the way that I can if it wasn't for every single step along the way. I would not be parenting my boys in a way that, I feel I'm changing the way, as one of my mentors is, and I've worked with her, is really healing generational wounds and patterns in order to transform the way generations have, because as I change, past generations, future generations change all at the same time. So I know that the work that I'm doing on myself in healing these patterns is changing in both directions, past and future. And that for me feels that's the legacy.
That is such a good point. And that just goosebumps because that's so, profound. Sounds a little dramatic, but really it is.
And it's then when we can really get that as we heal our patterns and our wounds, that actually is what we all want as parents, as lovers, as friends, is to be the greatest friend, the greatest lover, the greatest parent. So there is no question whatsoever that by doing the work on self, that actually that is the greatest gift right now in the world that we can be doing. The greatest. It is the greatest.
Yes. That changes the perspective on how you see everything that happens. So when you look at past relationships, pretty much relationships, whether it's a spouse, with a parent, with people at a career, whatever, healing those, or healing yourself, those relationships. But I love what you just said about you wouldn't be doing this work if it weren't for those relationships happening in the first place. It's a whole different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Much more compassionate.
I was sharing with you before we jumped on recording that we're back in lockdown in Melbourne and homeschooling, and there's a lot of tension in the home because I've got 3 boys and they've had months and months and months of homeschooling, and one of my boys is in his own internal world. He's got lots of stuff that he's going to have to work through if he chooses to work through it in this lifetime. But because of the tension, it's triggering his pain, and so I'm the one that gets attacked. And so what I'm seeing now is, somebody said to me, "I hope you're being really kind and compassionate with yourself." I'm like, ooh, it's another opportunity to up level. Because it's not to say that his words are not hurting, because I've obviously taken it personally, but it's actually my body, because I'm an empath and I'm highly sensitive. But it's how can I hold space for my feeling, as well as holding space for his pain in a house where we can't necessarily escape. It's like a pressure cooker, but I know there's a gift. When I remember and come back to center, I know that there's a gift for me to expand into more compassion. Yeah. In being more compassionate with me, for me it was taking myself off, not saying a word, there was nothing to say, closing my door, I'm going to meditate, compassionate to me, returning to me, holding myself, touching my body. Okay, darling, I know that felt really, really, really hurtful. That felt like you were being attacked and you felt rejected. I've got you. I'm not rejecting you. Like just returning, then softening into myself to then be able to, within half an hour, go out and hold space for him. And you know what? He never comes back and apologises. And I've had to work around that because I was raised saying if you ever did anything wrong, you go and apologise. And so I just learnt to do that. But I have a son that doesn't choose to do that. But then he changes his actions and he's saying, thank you so much, that was a delicious dinner. And, oh, you don't have to drive me here. And so I know. And so the last thing I'm going to do, because I know what that was like. I was him as a 17-year-old, spraying my pain onto my parents. Now I'm transforming it because I'm not responding. I'm not responding with my own fear, my own hurt, my projection of my own pain back onto him, which explodes. I'm transmuting it by loving him and showing him that no matter where he is, no matter what he does to me, I still love him.
Yes. You just mentioned meditation. What are the tools that you have used to move from where you were when everything was just fine to where you are now?
Whoa, okay. What are the tools that I use for me? So not the tools that I can get from somebody else. Okay. So meditation.
That you use, meditation.
So meditation. So I use kinesiology. that was somebody outside of me. But then I went and trained as a kinesiologist, so that became a qualification because I needed it for my own journey. Meditation, I've been meditating for 8 or 9 years now, and I have a mantra, so I'm a Vedic meditator. That's my go-to, and I meditate 20 minutes twice a day. I crave, especially right now, it's almost like I'm craving more of that, more of just to return, because I know that the more I can do that, the more I need it, that I can be more grounded, more centered in my heart. So meditation, breath is huge. And breath for me is just returning to breath constantly throughout the day. And then my heart practice, which is an ongoing throughout the day. I'm constantly, my hand is often back on my chest. Returning, okay, centering. How can I see this differently? I'm here. Whatever it is, it's returning to heart. Returning to heart for me is, it's just, I mean, it happens so often during the day. It's such a practice, such a habit of mine now. And then I have EFT, which I use if I'm in a really heightened state. I'm an EFT practitioner, so if I'm in a really heightened state, I'll use that. I use essential oils. I feel like, yes, and a big part, which I've now gone back to, is movement. So when I was separating almost 3 years ago, I could not sit and meditate. My body was in such a state of turmoil that I was like, I cannot actually sit still. This is not serving me. So I use music and movement to actually move and process the emotions that I was feeling, and it was powerful. I'd always loved dancing and music from a very early young age, but I'd forgotten it, and so it really came back very powerfully. And as I'm approaching my 50th next week, and also my divorce date, there's been quite a bit of grief that's come up, as I shared with you when we last talked. And I've gone back to moving my body and using music daily. And again, it has been really potent. So, yeah, but my daily is meditation and breath and heart. They're my daily practices.
The music and the movement, is there a specific music that you use? It's just something that because the reason I'm asking is because it's reminding me of when I was in college, my roommate and I would be studying and, late at night, and we're tired of reading the same pages over and over again. And we would take a dance break and we would just crank up a song and dance around the room. Nobody saw us, just the two of us looking like crazy loons. And then we'd go back to studying. Is it like that, or is there something more to it?
So when I first started using the music through my separation, I had been to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and we were able to access the playlist that they used. Now, the playlist contained music of all genres, all types, so there was stuff that was very meditative, but even the meditative stuff I used as movement. Active movement. So what this playlist did was actually, it was so in tune where I was. It was like when a song would come on, I would be able to tune into whatever it was, and a memory or a feeling would evoke, and I would move with that. I would move with the memory. I would move with the feeling coming up in my body. And that might, there were times that I'd be on the ground sobbing because of what I was going through. And then 15 minutes later, there'd be an upbeat song, and it was just the right time. It wasn't like I was forcing myself to feel upbeat. It was like my body was ready to get to the next stage. So I've actually created a playlist for the Wholehearted Woman, and I've got all types of music. I've got some slow, some much more deep and reflective, more upbeat. So I'm trusting, and I'm using it to work through. And so I just put it on, and I'm trusting that whatever comes on is what actually I need to move to.
Yes, I was going to say, no coincidence that the Joe Dispenza soundtrack was exactly what you needed, right? We know that. Yeah, very intuitively crafted, curated. Yeah. All right, speaking of music, what is the song now that you have on your playlist that you listen to when you need to get hyped up, charged energy? What's your song?
There are so many songs, and you asked me, and I had to go through my whole playlist, and now I'm like, it was a Coldplay one, and it's about dreams, and I've just forgotten the name of it. I'm terrible with the names of it. And also there's one...
A Sky Full of Stars.
Sky Full of Stars. Sky Full of Stars.
I love that song.
I love that song. But then, if you were... sometimes, depending on how I am, I like the more deeply reflective because then it makes me feel so alive. So it's a really tricky one to actually pinpoint. It doesn't have to be rah, rah, rah music for me to feel totally connected to my heart. And does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, and that's an answer I haven't gotten before.
I don't need the really fast upbeat because sometimes if I'm not in that state, it feels forced.
Yeah. Interesting. But I'm with you on the whole playlist. Yeah, I just love music, so it would be hard to choose just one.
I'll share my playlist with you after the call.
Oh, yes. Cool. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So you mentioned your wholehearted method, your wholehearted, the playlist that you have, or not different playlists, the music that you have. How can people find out more about that?
How can people find out more about my playlist or the work I do?
The work that you do. But you mentioned, before I asked you about the hype song, you mentioned that you had put together some music for Wholehearted.
So the Wholehearted, so if they want to go onto Spotify, it's under the Wholehearted Woman. But there is also, yes, or you can DM me and I'll share the link. The Wholehearted. So I've created a body of work called the Wholehearted Woman. So it's predominantly working with women, and there are a couple of men sort of circling because they're seeing the work that I'm doing with their partners, and seeing the how much that's impacting their relationship. And so it is a 90-day program, and it is a very sacred, deep container because they have access to me for 90 days. And I take them through the process of walking them back home to living and embodying their whole heart. And so it's not for the faint of heart. And it really requires deep commitment and a willingness to cultivate courage like they've never known before, and compassion. And so that's why I don't work with a lot of people because I'm totally devoted and committed to the women that I work with to ensure that they do forge a new path for themselves. Because I think there's so many people that know it all, that are still operating from the level of the mind, but not from heart, and really to return to heart. It's a process because most of us don't trust our hearts. We don't have that connection. So
at the same time, you're asking a lot from your clients, but you're not asking more than you've done for yourself. You're asking them to do, like, you're leading them because you've done that work.
And it is a privilege, and I get very emotional in a lot of sessions with my clients because I know what it takes, Laurie, to do this. And that's why I say it's really not for the faint of heart, because you have to be so committed to the process. Right. Because if you're not committed, to be committed is to actually be both feet in, all in. Yeah. And that's what it takes in your program and in my program to live without regrets. To live without regrets so that you don't die with regrets. And it reminds me even, and I know that I resonated so deeply with what you do and where you've come from because, for me, as I share with you, that I knew that I was settling inside my marriage. And so and when I came out of that meditation, and I decided that I could not live a life that was half-hearted, that where I was settling like other people around me, and I had experienced my whole life of settling. And so that would have been a regret. And I think it takes courage to listen to those nudges so that we don't live in regret, especially if things are fine. We can go along and be okay. Because it's okay. It's not bad. It's okay.
Until you get to the end and look back and say, oh, I wish I would have. When you see it from a different perspective, when you are at the end of your life, I imagine, because, we're not there. Well, who knows? We're not there yet. But I've tried to also look and live as if, okay, so when I'm 80, now I'm going to extend it. When I'm 100, will I be sorry I didn't, or whatever, and live from that perspective of saying, well, then I'm going to do this thing because I don't want to die with regrets.
And that, what you just shared, is a super powerful exercise I did years ago, where I wrote my own legacy, like I wrote my own eulogy. And I was like, how do I want to be remembered?
Yeah.
And when we actually get really clear on how we want to be remembered, then that can inform us as to what we need to do or change in order to leave that legacy.
Yes. Yes. It's almost like writing a visualization as well, or creating a visualization. It's a different path to it. But then you are pulled into it. If that's what you're visualizing, that's what you're pulled into. Wow. This has been such a powerful conversation. Really enjoyed talking
We've gone all over the place. It started and I was like, whoa, okay, where are we going?
Yes.
And then, in midway I had to show myself compassion, because I was like, I could even hear the little voice, you didn't answer that very well. And I was like, it's okay, darling, let that go. Let that go.
It's exactly what it needed to be.
Yeah.
So before we stop here, again, how can people reach you? What's the best way? What's your website? What is the socials that you're on?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all at Lisa Winneke. So all my name. www.lisawinneke.com is my website. And if people want to email me, they can email me there, or they can direct message on any of my social media channels. If they want to apply for a conversation to work with me, they just can send me a DM and I'll send them a link to the application. And did I say LinkedIn? And then YouTube. I've got my podcast, the Good News Guy, that's available on YouTube and all podcasting streaming vehicles.
Perfect. And we will put links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lisa, on Fine is a Four-Letter Word.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your questions. They're going to have me reflecting now. I love that.
Excellent. All right, take care.